Australia has some unique characteristics around AI and AI adoption compared to the rest of APAC, two, in fact. The first is that Australia has been extremely focused on, let's say, process optimization and optimizing the way that they do business. This is around either RPA technologies have been quite high, or asset optimization, et cetera, have been a real focus in the Australian market. The rest of APAC tends to focus more on customer use cases, and so a lot of focus on customer interaction, customer understanding, and business process driven by customer options. The second area that AI trend in Australia that's been, and most recently quite strong, is diving into the cloud technologies and moving very quickly away from the on-premise technologies. And that recent trend has been particularly strong in Australia.
Where is it doing well, especially, or where can it do better?
So Australia is doing extremely well in robotic process adoption, and so our automation. So the ability to do document processing or document handling or our other routine processes, Australia's put a lot of effort and had a lot of value come back from those sorts of exercises. And additionally, Australia has been, in a few industries, quite a strong leader in the IoT space and using machine-based information to improve, say, maintenance and machine performance. So there's a few areas where Australia's done quite well in that space.
Where can you do better?
I think that the next stage for Australia in terms of AI usage is going to be around business transformation based on the customer, the customer interaction and the customer experience. So large parts of APAC, finance in China, for example, is extremely well known for transforming the finance industry around the customer experience and the financial transaction around the digital experience. And I think that sort of change coming to Australia is going to be the next wave of Australian innovation. Australia has been really focused on doing digital inside the business, and I think Australia is very close to becoming digital outside the business.
Do you think moves like open banking and open data sharing will actually help drive this in Australia?
Absolutely, and it's an interesting topic because it's becoming more and more on the agenda every day, but it's still not quite sure exactly how it'll change the agenda, but it is definitely building momentum. And that's not just in banking, but in every industry, the openness of data is becoming more and more important. Of course, that does introduce a lot of jurisdictional issues, regulatory issues around privacy maintenance and around data access and the ethics of data usage in an open environment. So those are some coming challenges for the region.
Which are the use cases that is defining the Australian scene?
So the main use cases that are driving the most value are the optimization and, let's say, the predictive modeling. So either asset usage is a really important use case, and then a use case that's starting to grow is all around predicting behavior and predicting outcomes. And that's going to be, let's say, the next wave of important use cases.
Are there any specific industries that's standing out in terms of AI adoption?
Well, Australia's got a pretty broad use of AI. In the mining and industrials are very heavy into AI usage in particular. Financial services is using a lot of AI technologies, and telecommunications, of course. Maybe one area where AI really hasn't started to transform Australia yet is in the retail experience. That's still, but that wave is coming. I think that change is not far off, that the AI technologies and the customer interaction in the retail experience is going to become quite strong over the next few years.
What's stopping that? The development of that? Is it consumers are not ready for it? Data privacy concerns?
Well, data privacy is a big issue, and that's one area where the government can certainly add a lot of help on this in terms of digital identity, privacy, and ethics regulations. But another part of it is that the Australian market is just really suited toward an experience that's physical, I guess. We're quite an urban country, and quite a limited country in terms of population centers, et cetera. So the compelling opportunity for transformation and for change is not the same as it is in some other regions, where populations are far greater and far more spread apart, and the ability to leverage the digital technologies to access new markets is far greater than it necessarily is locally in Australia. But those changes are coming very quickly.
So in the report, Australia does figure quite strongly in some use cases, as you've mentioned. But why does, on an overall picture, AI development and AI maturity, Australia is still seen as a laggard?
I think a large part of that is because Australia's on the trailing edge of the digital transformation wave. There's only a few examples of really large digitally native companies in Australia that have really made the digital change. But I think that is rapidly, the pressure is building for that to change within the region. And I think that that'll soon change. So that's why the report tends to find that it's a laggard, in that the AI-led transformation of business models is slower here than it is elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that AI is not used, but it's largely used in support of existing business models.
Okay. And do you think labor costs is part of the problem?
Labor cost, not necessarily, although labor is the cost of labor is always an issue, but it's labor access, and particularly in the last year and ever since the COVID pandemic has been underway, access to the sort of talent that can drive these issues becomes more and more challenging for every Australian enterprise. So that is a definite challenge. Labor access. Cost goes along with that, but it's the access to talent is even more challenging.
How can Australian companies shift from cost containment to revenue optimization?
Well, some of the answers are rather obvious, which is focus on revenue optimizing opportunities, in the marketing space and in the sales space. That's an obvious answer. But the real challenge and the real opportunity is looking for ways to interact with your customers completely differently, to change the experience and the pattern that they have for interaction. More and more of that is happening within Australia. There's different companies like Afterpay Touch, for example, that are starting to change the way that customers behave, all driven off a digital view of the world. So the change to Australia is coming, and it's really around understanding and exploring the customer experience and the interaction with customers.
Okay. And do you see, you have mentioned before that privacy and data protection is huge topics in Australia. How can actually Australian companies address them right up front when it comes to AI projects?
The best way to address those up front is to deal with people who have experience, and to leverage the thoughts and learnings of people who have experienced it before. So the most important bit of advice I can give companies is to ask for help and to learn from experience. So addressing those up front mean considering the issues around governance, and then establishing the capabilities needed to execute against governance. Considering the issues around ethics and privacy and data usage up front, so that policies and procedures and just a general framework for considering those issues could be established up front. But it's really important to leverage the learnings of others who addressed the challenge successfully before.
How important is government support when it comes to driving AI across Australia?
Well, extremely important. And the areas of importance that are around privacy regulations, around digital and data exposure, the regulatory environment, and is the biggest help that the government can work on. And working with industry on that is job one.
Okay. What must Australian business do now, right now, to start their journey to become an AI leader?
So step one is commit to using AI technologies to change the business. The opportunities to change the business are overwhelming. The way I do business today and the way I can do business tomorrow. So making the effort and making the commitment to understand how these technologies and these new ways of doing business can change my business is the most important thing to do right now. The second thing to do right now is to set myself up for success by accessing the talent and the partnerships that I need in order to leverage those opportunities and to realize those opportunities. So that's what Australian business can do today.
As a last question and a follow-up to what you just mentioned, do you see companies that do not do that? Are they losing out, or do they face an opportunity cost, or is it an existential cost itself?
Well, at the moment, I would say it's often thought of as an existential cost because the market is not moving extremely fast, but it's getting very close to a point where it's going to move digitally extremely quickly. And AI technologies are going to be at the middle of making all that happen. And so the cost will very quickly mount into the hurdle to becoming an AI company is getting greater every day. And the gap and the challenge will only become greater.
What do you think companies can do to drive AI?
Well, there's 4 things that I recommend companies do. Number one is companies looking to become AI driven, start small and leave nothing untouched. So look for opportunities to leverage the technologies across your business. No opportunity is too small, and no area is unable to benefit from the application of these technologies. The second thing is to look for a really good balance between people and machines, is that the ability of AI to enhance and supplement Australian companies' productivity, customer interactions, cost optimizations is huge, and balancing what you do with people and the business is really important. The third thing is a challenge, but it's explore new value models, new ways to interact with your customers that AI and data and digital technologies can drive. And so these can be things that are very challenging to the way you do business today, but the businesses are behaving differently all over the world, and these models are becoming ubiquitous. And it's really important that the Australian companies consider the same challenges. And then lastly is look at data modernization as a continuous loop, staying on the front edge of data technologies, of AI technologies, and ensuring that you're always thinking of ways that you can apply the latest developments to your customers and to your business is really important to success. This is not a one-stop journey. Change has become a non-stop process, and it's become extremely fast. So staying aware of that and how to apply it to your business is utterly critical to success.
And does Cognizant actually work through all 4 steps with companies, as well as share knowledge from other use cases so that they can actually fast track the AI journey?
Absolutely. We're a very good partner in that respect. And one of the things that we do extremely well when in partnership with our customers, is working on problems in the let's just get started and do things small and look for value. And the examples of driving big benefits from small projects abound. And that's one of the things in the APAC region that was really noticeable from in comparison to other regions, is that APAC is really into the start small and drive value today perspective. And I can't recommend enough that Australian companies adopt that sort of approach.
Thank you.